I'm from Santa Barbara Wargaming. I'm interviewing the creator of Kingdom Death Monster, Adam Poots. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. I just want to let you guys know that I have not checked these questions first. I don't know what they're going to ask me. If I say too much, I'm going to ask them to cut it. I trust them, but, you know.
So it's a big mistake. So Adam, first question, how far do you actually want the Kingdom Death intellectual property to go? Obviously, it's really struck a chord with the gaming community. Do you see books, movies, video games in your future, or do you want to stick more to the realm of board gaming?
So I am working very slowly on a 2D game. On the Kickstarter, I've posted some of the sprites. It's an old school pixel game. It is inspired by old cinematic platformers like Prince of Persia, the original one, Flashback, Out of This World.
Yeah.
It's the kind of game where you have to think about what you're going to do before you do it, and then you fail a bunch of times before you pull it off.
Very Kingdom Death.
On a very slow track, you know, it's more of like a hobby. I don't get much time to put into it. And as far as like comics, movies, video games, I don't know. I'm focused. I get very obsessed with one thing at a time. Right now, it's all the promises I've made to everybody publicly. So I don't know. You know, it's hard because we get offers from people all the time who want to license and do all these things, and I don't think, especially not now, that I have the time to really get into it and make sure like a project like that ends up being something that I'm happy with. And if I'm not happy with it, I don't think the fans would be happy with it. So it's just kind of like see what happens.
Absolutely.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Absolutely. So the second question is, how do you view Kingdom Death? Do you see it as just escapist fantasy, or do you think there's some sort of social commentary about the meaning of life, the meaning of death, human mortality? Is it a dark mirror to our world, or is it completely separate and it's just meant to be enjoyed as a separate thing?
That's a great question. I don't often even have time to muse that. All of this just comes from within. It's a very personal vision. So like even getting to the point where I was comfortable sharing any of the work with like my partner and the cats took a while, and then getting to the point where we were like having to expose myself to artists and then have things made, and I'm getting better at it. There's still a lot of things that I hold really close to my chest until I'm comfortable with what's made before I even take it to the rest of the team. So as far as it being like any sort of social commentary or have like, you know, deeper meanings, I don't even know yet. I don't think I've untangled that. I'm too busy in the process of creating and now in the process of managing the creation of it to even like think about it that much.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. So my next question, it's perfectly fine to skip this. I'm sure this is a very frustrating question, but obviously Kingdom Death has a big scalping community, people buying stuff, reselling it for profit. Do you see that as something that you should be addressing, or is that something that's just the natural process of the market, it can't be avoided?
I say to fans all the time, like, slow down, pledge responsibly. You don't need all this stuff. Like, the core game is more than enough. I am honored and flattered beyond belief that people want so much of what we make. It's awesome, but I can't control people's buying habits, nor can I control the secondary market. I think, like, from the very beginning, it's kind of like you're trying to run a business and you're trying to get things going, and you're constantly dealt like, you know, a hand, and I just kept trying to play the best hand from those cards over and over again. In the initial phase of it, like, we were one of the first independent companies to make a 3D printed model. And, you know, I remember looking at it and being like, the printer sent me a whole bunch of different sizes. He was super excited to work on something like this. Normally they print like golf balls. This is like 2008, right?
Okay.
And I ended up liking the version of it that was more on the 35 millimeter scale than the one that was on the 28 scale, because like everything just looked too thin from a tabletop view.
Sure.
When a model's joint, like limbs are too thin, it gets kind of like an insect kind of appearance.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, the base size is the same. I guess, you know, 28 millimeter heroic, 35, whatever. There was a big backlash there. But when I finally found a casting partner, they're like, we can't make this in metal. I was like, okay, well, I don't really like metal anyway, so what about resin? He's like, well, we can do resin, but it's usually for mastering, so it's much slower and going to be much more expensive. I was like, okay, well, how much for 100 units? And he told me. I was like, okay, that's literally all I can afford. Okay, let's do it. And then So that was sort of the beginning. And so I made it a limited run because that was the only thing I could afford.
Right.
And like every model after that was limited due to the combination of my own personal budget and then what the caster could make.
Right.
And as far as resin is concerned, those issues still persist.
Right.
While we have a much bigger budget to work with, our partner can only make so much every month. So that's kind of like...
You can't compromise the quality.
Right, and then I feel like once the fans have the idea that they can't have something, they want it even more.
Yep,
so it's like every sale we miss is almost like 2 sales down the road. It's like, no, guys, stop, please, just slow down.
Yep.
And that's sort of where we ended up in this. I mean, we find it personally frustrating too. Like, we launch a sale, and everyone buys everything in like 2 hours. They make a gigantic mess of the store. They break the system somehow. There's a million different tickets, and they're like, okay, now we got to spend a few days sorting everything out before we can even ship anything because we don't want to make any mistakes.
Right, yeah.
And then when it comes to the core game, by the time we finished it and it was finally shipping, we had spent like everything. And it's like, all right, we are now in the red. We need to sell this game for this much, or this is done. This whole thing is done. And that's why it ended up being a $400 game.
Yep.
Distributors didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I mean, that makes sense. It's fair. I guess we'll just sell it ourselves. So, you know, our own natural evolution has, I guess, created room for the secondary market, even though that was not the intent, nor it is something that I am particularly thrilled about either. A lot of it feels like artificial inflation.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, like, yeah, if I were a fan of something and I knew if I bought 2, I could sell one of them and not just make my money back on both, I'd make money. I'd be like, yeah, I'll do that, sure.
Yeah.
I've been there.
It's a tough incentive, absolutely. Well, hopefully that calms the market a little bit. So last question, a little bit.
Yeah, now that Toys R Us is defunct, if I can say this, they had an amazing promotion with Domino's Pizza at one point where Domino's was handing out these coupons for these $5 Lego toys. And my friend like stole a book of them from Domino's. So we ran into Toys R Us, got like 30 of these things each, and immediately returned them for cash. It was awesome.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is on that. Hopefully that was within the law. Yeah, he was a minor. Please disregard.
Nothing illegal. It was just a loophole, you know? I didn't steal the stack of coupons. Me. He worked at Domino's.
Accessory after the fact.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. So last question, hopefully a little bit more fun. If you could send a message back in time to yourself at the start of the first Kickstarter, what would you say to yourself?
That's a good question. Relax.
Relax. I think that's the message of Kingdom Death is relax. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate all your answers.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem.
Have a great day.
Great job.